JP here with another Chalk Talk session. Today we're going to be talking about audio. I wanted to kind of record this little quick intro with the session that is kind of a part one introduction with a buddy of mine that I worked with at Harvest Christian Fellowship, Shae Taylor, and he's the AV Tech Director at Harvest, managing all things audio and managing that process from a live or pre-produced set of content. Shae shares a little bit about what's going on with him and kind of what it's been like at Harvest and what they're having to focus on and doing. And we wanted to talk about in the introduction of this conversation in part one of what are some considerations for audio, right? What does it mean to think about the software? Just some approaches in terms at, scratching the surface when it comes to audio. There's a lot of moving parts to the audio and developing a standard or workflow that works for you. And as he shares for that, we're going to continue on in part two and kind of dive a little bit deeper. So if you're an online pastor, AV tech director, or somebody, in another organization, a nonprofit, love to hear your thoughts. Where are you at? The goal of this channel is to talk about connecting, streaming, and delivering, right? And when we talk about connecting, it's making that connection to deliver an online video event, whether that's live or content distribution, and that and streaming it, and then delivering it right to those that are watching online. Whether you're a church or a nonprofit or corporation, there are similarities to this process that are important that we need to really look at and think about. And audio is one of those parts of the process that often can become very challenging, especially when we're dealing with both in the environment that we've generally been able to handle from a production or a live event. But now we're talking about remote elements, right? What does that look like? Microphones, software, editing, what helps during the capture point and then editing that afterwards if you're doing pre-produced content. If you're doing live elements, right? What does that look like there? So Shae and I are going to cover that maybe more in the part two. I would say maybe we will. And maybe we might have some follow-on dialogue discussions and some other topics that we talk about when it comes to the audio process for online streaming. And Shae's going to bring his expertise to the table. We're going to have kind of a discussion. We had some ideas, we brainstorm afterwards, and I think you'll enjoy this. So love to hear your thoughts. Again, your questions, concerns that you're experiencing, share that with us, because comments really help in terms of the algorithm that YouTube manages for these videos as we go forward. So hit the subscribe button as content gets added, keeps you in the loop. More importantly, hit the notification bell so you get notified when an item is added, and hit the like button. If this was helpful, it lets us know that this was helpful for you, because that's part of these Chalk Talk sessions is taking the discussion that we have and the people that I bring into these conversations and contributing to help provide some hopefully value for where you may be at and maybe where we can help you. So enjoy this session. Take care. Hey everybody, welcome to another session of JP's Chalk Talks, and I've got a great friend today with me, Shae Taylor. Now, Shae and I have been friends for some time now. We work together at Harvest Christian Fellowship or Harvest Ministries, and Shae has been part of the audio team. He's been involved with the church for some time, and so he's been a great friend and a great resource for me from the webcast production side. So Shae and I are going to kind of take maybe a part one of sorts and talk about online audio. And there's been a lot of questions on Facebook I've seen on Facebook and different platforms of communities discussing the do's and don'ts, right? And as everybody's kind of pivoted in this 8-month period of post-COVID of developing an online video strategy, whether you're live streaming or doing capture to record for content distribution, maybe in a simulated live component, There are ways and means that we go about to develop the right strategy to support quality. And we've talked about that in the quality of experience, right? Audio and lighting are key. So Shay and I are going to take a few minutes today, a little bit of time, and talk about audio. So, hey, Shay, welcome. Glad to have you with me today.
Thanks for having me on, John.
All right. How are you doing? It's just been a very busy 8 months. You and I started out and we were there, and I know you've been extremely busy and you've got a large team to manage and a lot of things, always a lot of irons in the fire.
Yeah, it's been nuts, just to put it mildly.
Yeah.
It's been insane. Um,
Yeah.
but we're doing all right. We're working through all the changes and trying to keep up with all the COVID guidelines. And they're constantly. We're in California, so they seem to be constantly changing. So we're
Yes.
constantly adapting, and our strategy. And yeah, but we're doing all right. I'm doing okay.
That's good.
Looking forward to a vacation when this is over.
Yes, I'm sure you would. Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, and I'm sure many will be watching this. I think we all can relate to the amount of effort, the mental power, and everything that we've had, the energy that's been put into just facilitating a lot of the things that you and I've had to deal with
Yeah.
on the projects and the things you and items you continue to work with. So Shay, what I was thinking about was today in regards to our conversation. Everybody's kind of pivoted really quickly in terms of the online streaming environment, and a lot of churches, a lot of different organizations, and as part of that pivoting of sorts and trying to establish an online type video live streaming or some way of taking that or capturing that content and distributing it online. Audio is obviously an important factor, right? The quality of the audio, things to think about when it comes to the best practices of sorts of determining, depending what stage somebody might be at, and there's different stages. Somebody might still be kind of in that beginner stage, and then there's somebody that's maybe a little bit more, has been doing this now a while. Now they've got to decide, where do we invest? What do we need to be thinking about in terms of considerations as we take steps to upgrade and improve what they may be using from an equipment perspective or maybe software.
Yeah.
So, I think one of the things that, it's a kind of a broad question, but what's the best approach for managing online streaming for, let's say, a church, right, and a house of worship space? I mean, that's a broad question, but
Mhm.
would there be one or two points that you would think of that would be to think about, when we've done this ourselves? Obviously, that's what you do in-house if you're meeting in-house, but then there's this
Mhm.
combination hybrid model where people are online, right?
Right.
And ensuring
Yeah.
that they can hear and those pieces. Would you have anything to kind of touch on that point?
Well, I think just to keep it super basic, I'm talking to the churches that are just starting to get into this, and then we can kind of go into like what we do at Harvest
Sure.
right now, which is a bit complicated, but definitely I think produces the best results.
Sure.
But from a beginner standpoint, I think the most important thing you can concentrate on when you first start down this streaming world is, making sure your levels are um, relative to each other. And what I mean by that is, specifically in a church setting, you have music, you have speaking, um, and then you might have, a breakout session of video or whatever play. And then, so all that has to be relatively um, at the same level. And
Hmm.
what I mean is that, know, music can be sound, loud, and it could meter on a meter at a particular point. And if you take a speaking mic and you put that meter at the same point, it's going to sound way louder than the music. So it's just knowing that and adjusting those levels to sound relative to each other, so you have this cohesive, um, what would you call it, service
Hmm.
being streamed out to the public. So they're
Hmm.
not having to have to turn up their TV or turn it down or whatever. So
Right.
I think that's, from a basic standpoint, that's um, probably a first step. And there's strategies that you could use to simplify that process. That if you want to go into, we can. But that's
Yeah,
where I
I
would
think.
start. And if you, I guess we can go over kind of what we do at Harvest to kind of
Sure, yeah. Why don't you take a
mitigate
moment?
those things.
Yeah, take a moment to talk about Harvest, what are the setup there, because I think people will be interested in hearing a little bit about that.
Yeah, so pre-COVID, we had a broadcast mix position, as you're aware of, and we had a separate. I mix that typically. We mix that for our online church, and that was live to tape. Um, but post COVID, things kind of changed, and we kind of started, you know, producing a little more and wanting to do a little more in post production to really, really iron out the issues that you have with a live to tape service. So we record all of the tracks of the band, all of the tracks of the speaking mics, pastor and announcement mics separately into the computer, and I mix that down in post. And then, our video team puts that together and creates the service from there. So, yeah, that's how we do it right now. So,
which is, you're saying that at the same time, there's a lot of work, right?
It's a very simplified explanation, but
yeah, that's kind of, yeah. And I talked to somebody yesterday who was that will be posting a video here. It's not online yet for everybody, but there will be another video that hopefully by this time this is posted online. That is a writer producer in kind of in the media entertainment space that worked at Universal, and he's kind of trying to talk about just the elements from an editing perspective, right? Between Premiere, Final Cut, DaVinci Resolve, Avid, right? All these different tools, and I think the same applies to audio. Because while we appreciate the opportunity and the respect we have, and I have for somebody like yourself and others in the audio team that provide a lot of value and input and management oversight in terms of making sure that mix is done correctly and the levels are set, right? And we talk about that. And I think that's true for a lot of organizations that are looking at this. And is there a software solution that you think of? I know that there's been a lot of people talk about different approaches to that. Where you may be taking it, maybe producing it more of a different, instead of like live to tape, but you're taking something maybe to kind of post production or capture. Is there a different software platform solution that you see on that is becoming more common, let's say in the post-COVID era, that you see surfacing more and more?
I don't know if there's a particular, software suite that you could just go out and buy. I know a lot. Something that's gotten fairly popular, and I've seen a few YouTube videos on it where churches are diving into this as well, is they're mixing a lot in Pro Tools, even live. So they'll take an X32 or some other console that will allow you to pull inputs from the stage, and then they'll route that to a computer, mix in Pro Tools, and then route it back and then send it out. So from a software perspective, I think that's probably the simplest solution. And it's the only one I probably would recommend outside of a console and other live solutions. So
yeah, I think that's true. And I think, and I think just like with the streaming world and community, there are a lot of choices.
Yeah,
and sometimes within those choices, there are kind of pros and cons, right? There's the good and the bad, right? There are certain things you're going to get from a feature perspective that are going to add some value. And then you have to understand that. And I think that's for everybody watching this session. I think the goal that we have, and Shae and I talked about this, as I've talked with other people that we've done some other sessions with this week, and discussing kind of the approaches, right? And people will often ask, well, isn't there a standard? Well, there are standards in terms of the specifics for the field of expertise that you're working on. Not so much, I mean, you can make a choice, and I can make a choice of using a Rodecaster Pro, dialing it into my ATEM Mini and doing certain things to facilitate what I want to do. Is that the right approach? Well, there's probably other options, right? And there's probably different ways you can do that from the remote studio perspective. But when it comes to a church and online, I think one thing that has come up more often is having a mixer or having something that's in addition to your existing maybe front of house system setup when you are capturing, so that you can maximize maybe limit the amount of time you have to edit and make sure that everything is level. Is that the
Yeah.
right approach, do you think, to have something in addition to where we would do a broadcast mix, right? And we would try to, well, you, not me, but you would do the broadcast mix and you would try to make sure everything was dialed in correctly.
Mhm.
Is that an area that you think people should think about in terms of just if they're capturing to do that, or work more on the post side, like you said, with Pro Tools, and then take it from there?
That's a good question, and a lot depends on budget and time.
Mm-hmm.
Because a separate console is going to cost money. Even
Mm-hmm.
in a post production suite with Pro Tools and a computer is going to cost money. So
Mm-hmm.
um, the most budget conscious solution would be, from a front of house console or your one console and you send that out. But that said, the best solution, I think the best all around solution would be a broadcast position, even over like a post production um, solution, because post production takes so much time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think it's much more cost effective and time effective to try to get it live to tape as much as possible. Um, but that also requires a lot of pre-production too. So it, there's pros and cons to each solution.
Yeah,
Uh,
no, you're right. No, you're right. And I think there's a lot of it that, either way, you need to put planning in. There's planning involved, right?
yeah,
And preparing to support that process. Um,
yeah,
so absolutely, I think that's a key area.
yeah. I think if I had in a perfect world, I think what I would want would be, you know, the from a church perspective. Let's start from there. I would want the worship team, the the production team, and maybe the pastoral team, whoever's involved in the capture. Let's get together, let's do some pre-production, let's figure out exactly what we're going to do, how we're going to do it,
Mm-hmm.
and then we're going to capture it live to tape. But I'm also going to pull in the tracks and record the tracks just in case we want to do some post-production, and that would be the perfect workflow for me. But the goal would be to do it live to tape as much as possible to save me time. Like, I don't know if a lot of people know this, or especially those who haven't done this, but post producing an entire service, um, like for example, the ones I do for Harvest at home, um, and this is just on the audio side. That takes me roughly 8 to 12 hours of work just to edit,
Wow.
mix, export, and deliver. And then our video team has to put that together, put it to the video, edit that down, and then it's done. So it's a good 2 to 3 day process to
Wow.
um, produce quality content.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, yeah, like I said, in a perfect world, live to tape would save me so much time, but with the option to be able to post produce.
Yeah.
So,
No, I think you're right. Well, and I think people don't often, they think of one area of this process just real quick on when we're capturing that is, you may be doing that and talking about the process it would be to deliver the content that's going to be distributed over the weekend for a simulated live type
mhm,
stream. The other part of it is people thinking about, and we'll probably maybe dive into part two, is that audio that you're capturing and those elements from a both creative perspective in terms of the content and signal acquisition is also being utilized maybe for podcast, right?
yeah,
Those may be
hmm
used for other areas. So the more time you spend to try to make sure that the environment you have, whether it's live or you're capturing and doing that production and recording and then taking it, is leveraging that content to be utilized to distribute in other types of media, especially with post-COVID, right? Where we're seeing
yep,
greater levels of online activity. And a discussion we had this week I had it with another pastor on Wednesday, and today is the 23rd of October. But what we discussed on Wednesday on the 21st was, I sent him a report. People are spending 6.5 hours or more now, 7 hours just on their mobile devices,
hmm
right? And accessing content. And as we see this increased activity because of the COVID and the change of the interaction with those that we're serving, especially for our online congregants, online church, we now have to be a little bit more deliberate about how we're going about certain things and planning it out. And then at the same time, to your point, making your job a little easier when it comes to the amount of effort and time, not only for yourself, 8 to 12 hours, that's just for you. It's not counting video, like you said, right? And so I think
that's not counting capture. That's not the capture time either. That's just post. And not to interrupt you, but
yeah, go ahead.
A lot of that time, I have to spend that much time because we don't pre-produce anything. And a lot of that would be cut down if we, pre-produced a little more. Right. So that's a good point there.
Yeah. I think that's one of the areas that part of the dialogue with these sessions and the Chalk Talks will be to kind of think about that and provide some constructive thoughts for consideration, synopsis, if you will, and in doing that. So, you know what? I think we've kind of come to a point where I think we've covered just the initial stage here, everybody, on part one. I want to save the best for the next part of this, what Shay and I are going to look at and do the part two. And that would be, what are some of the skill sets we need to think about? What are some of the testing components, right? Shay's talked about the pre-producing and all these various workflows that we have to really think about. And the goal of these sessions is for you to really learn from it and share. So sharing your comments and asking questions when these videos are posted, and with this particular video, what are you doing? Let Shay and I know. We'd be happy to address questions, redirect it over to Shay. He could provide some input. Are you struggling in certain areas of your audio for your church? Are there struggles that you're seeing that you need to think about that, you've been doing this now for 8 months and you want to improve? Or maybe you've been doing it for some time and you want to make some changes to your environment and you want to expand and go to a broadcast level type, what we've talked about today. So Shay, I'm going to close off here for the moment and say, this is part one. And we're going to jump into part two. And I think that in part two, we're going to talk a little bit about some of these other attributes to this process that provide thoughts and you and I can think about this and bring this back for everybody and talk about it when it comes to that. I'm thinking of testing audio for quality, developing good audio strategy, the skills, right? The volunteer, the individuals that are involved in there. Worship mixes, right? There's another topic. What are the best practices when it comes to a worship mix? There's a lot of different ways we can do these, approach these areas, but if you don't have the skills or the certain maybe thoughts to consider that you in making those decisions when it comes to what we're talking about live or where you're capturing, I think that's going to be another area. So I want to thank Shay for his time today and just us kind of tackling this. This is a very big topic. And I think that this is going to be kind of a maybe part two. Maybe we'll expand it and maybe do a little bit more of a series. But I think this dialogue is good to have a discussion with everybody. So I want to thank Shay for his time. Thank you, Shay, because I know you're super busy and you got a lot going on, man. And, I appreciate Shay's friendship and all he's done. I can't say enough for the audio guys that are out there. And if you're in audio and watching this, because I think they really bring a lot to the table, so to speak, when it comes to the team. It's not just me, and I've said this time before, and Shane, I've talked about this in our hallway conversations. I bring one part of that expertise and support to the process from a webcast producer. The audio team brings another high-value process, to the effort, and then there's the video team. And I think that at the end of the day, if an organization has this, there's a lot of different elements as part of the team that's constructed to do this, to help deliver what's asked of us to do. Whether you're at a church or another organization, in the nonprofit space, there's a lot of ways. So stay tuned for part two, folks. We're going to do another part two, or another part to it, and go from there. Thanks, everybody. Stay safe. Stay well. Talk to you soon.